Well, hey there, and welcome to the ultimate guide to giving fees for churches. Now, when you're making a decision to partner with a church giving provider, the most consequential part of that decision will be the fee structure that your church will be charged. And that's because the costs of church giving providers are unique and unlike any other piece of software or tool that your church is likely paying for. And because of that, misunderstanding these pricing structures can be quite costly, to the tunes of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars per year. So the purpose of this video is to once and for all provide clarity on how these costs are calculated and what that actually means for your church. Because transparency is also not exactly the norm in the industry. So set aside the time for this video because it is imperative that every church leader understands how this all works. As for my qualifications, I'm Brady Shearer. I'm the creator of Pro Church Tools and a software platform for churches called Nucleus. Nucleus Giving, our giving solution for churches, is part of the Nucleus universe of products. Several thousand churches are on paid subscriptions using Nucleus, and so everything you're about to hear in this video comes from my up-close and intimate understanding of how the system and industry works behind the scenes. Now, I'll preface this entire video with the acknowledgement that what we're about to talk about could be understood as self-serving. As I just mentioned, we've built our own giving solution for churches. The truth is, despite working in the world of church and digital and communications for years, I wasn't aware of the problem with giving fees and everything we're about to talk about in this video until just a few years ago. And in fact, it was that realization that motivated my team and I to build Nucleus Giving in the first place. So on the one hand, you need intimate behind-the-scenes knowledge of this industry to really talk about it in depth, which demands some kind of involvement yourself. Ancillary to that, presenting content like this without a solution aimed at solving the problem can kind of come off as being critical without a willingness to maybe have skin in the game yourself, like a backseat driver. And then finally, we're working with thousands of churches at Nucleus. We've now processed hundreds of millions of dollars in gifts for these churches over the years. So we now have the data necessary, our own real-world data at scale, to stack up against what is currently the industry standard. But at the beginning, you never really know for sure, right? Like we had a hunch when we first started, we were confident in our trajectory, but you've got to actually do the work to see if you are correct or not. Bottom line, I understand the optics. Talking about this stuff is always tricky, and whomever you're currently using or will be using in the future, my goal with this video is to give you the knowledge that's currently missing when most churches make these decisions. Because the reality is that hundreds of millions of dollars in donations to churches are being needlessly lost every year to fees. It's preventable. The solution is one of the cornerstone beliefs we hold at the company that I lead, and the impact a video like this can make will inevitably translate to millions of dollars of lost donations being reclaimed by churches and then being used for the purpose of ministry and affecting real life change, which is what this is all about. So I know these conversations are never perfect, but they are necessary. And irrespective of the giving platform you use, whether you use Nucleus now, in the future, or never, this information is equally important for all of us. Okay, and one last thing. Again, this is obviously a longer video. I've done everything in my power to make it as condensed as possible. And to help with that, we've got a fees cheat sheet linked in the description and above me. This is a visual breakdown of everything I'm about to talk about, so you can share it with others and it's handier for reference than a long form video. This content is also available in blog post format for easy sharing and skimming and revisiting. That's also linked above me and in the description. And finally, there's also a special Easter egg for everyone that makes it to the end of this video, so be on the lookout for that. Let's begin. Now, the first thing to understand with any digital transaction is that there is a fee associated with it. This means anytime you pay for groceries, fill up your car with gas, or give to your church, and you do it with a credit or debit card, there's a fee that must be paid. And this is why, perhaps you've seen signs like this before. They used to be more popular years ago. You'd go to a corner store and there'd be a note near the payment machine that said something like no credit or debit cards unless your transaction is over $5 or something like that. And the reason a sign like that would be posted is because the owners of that corner store didn't want to have to pay the merchant fee on those really small transactions that often happen at corner stores, because those merchant fees would eat into or perhaps even eliminate the already small profit margins they were working with. Now, the solution for this in retail or any for-profit business is pretty straightforward. Account for how many people use cards to pay for what you sell, and then build that fee into the price of the products themselves. Offset the fees, and you're back to where you started with margins. So as the world has gone digital in the past couple decades, and paying with cards has become the norm, businesses have adjusted, and we move on like normal, which is why for most of us, we probably don't really think about merchant fees on digital transactions. This, of course, becomes more complicated with churches because we can't just raise our prices and adjust. So how much are these fees? And what are they for? Well, according to Square, an American financial services and digital payments company, when it's all said and done, the average cost of processing payments for businesses that do anywhere between $10,000 and $250,000 in annual revenue is between 2.87% and 4.35% per transaction. And according to the National Congregation's Study of Economic Practices, the median annual revenue for churches is around $169,000. So that puts churches within that bracket of annual revenue and gives us a range to work with here. Basically, anywhere between 2.87 and 4.35%. And so what this means is that for every $1,000 your church receives in digital donations, you're gonna lose, on average, anywhere between $28.70 to $43.50 to merchant fees, which is substantial. And this cost is paid to the credit card companies like Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and it allows us the convenience of paying for things with cards and ensures that everything is compliant, safe, and secure. So that's a quick rundown of how fees work with all digital transactions in the world. Let's laser in now on churches and donations specifically, because here's the thing. Credit card companies are all a bit different. American Express charges something different from Visa, which is different from MasterCard. It can get complicated. So what happens is a church giving company will come in and say, okay, let's make this more accessible for churches. We'll blend the costs of different cards together to give you a more predictable fee. We'll also provide you with this nice software dashboard and a ton of great tools to make digital giving smooth and enjoyable in your ministry. Simple enough. So that brings us to the costs that are publicly posted on church giving provider sites. Let's compare. We'll start with Tithely. It's 2.9% plus 30 cents for every transaction, unless it's American Express, and then it's 3.5% plus 30 cents. PushPay, they don't publicly disclose their pricing, but it's virtually the same. Kindred has volume discounts, but from what they've publicly posted, it's anywhere between 2.6 to 3% plus 30 cents. Again, basically the same. Kindred is also part of a bigger parent company called Ministry Brands that includes Easy Tithe, Simple Give, eGiving, Clover Give, Ecclesia 360 Giving, and more. So all of that pricing is going to be comparable. Subsplash is 2.3 to 2.9% plus 30 cents, so again, very similar. And these varying rates are based on volume. So, sometimes the more giving you see in your church, the better rate you can negotiate. But that brings us to Nucleus Giving, our platform. We charge a flat rate of 1.9% for every card, for every church, for every transaction, not 1.9% plus 30 cents, not more for Amex, just 1.9%. Which begs the question, why is our rate lower than the others? We're all working with the same credit card companies, the same payment processors, so what's happening? Here's what's happening. The term you need to familiarize yourself with is called Rev-Share. Basically what happens is after the church giving companies have negotiated the rate they're gonna end up paying the credit card companies and the payment processors, they say, well, hey, why don't we add an extra 1%, let's say, and we'll keep that part for ourselves and pass the rest on to pay the credit card companies. And so the disparity you see between the Nucleus giving rate of 1.9% and the rates that other church giving companies charge is the easy way to see how much they're keeping for themselves. So with Tithely, their rate is 2.9% plus 30 cents and more for American Express, but let's forget about that for a second for the sake of simplicity. Nucleus Giving's rate is 1.9% flat. So the difference there, if you subtract, is 1% plus 30 cents for every credit card transaction. Now, this math isn't perfect because these companies aren't always transparent, rarely, on how they calculate their rates, but that's a pretty black and white way of estimating it because at Nucleus Giving, we get our rate directly from the same credit cards and we pass that on to you directly without inflating it to keep a little bit of extra for ourselves. And that's what's happening here, right? Church giving companies are artificially inflating processing fees to keep a bit of every single tithe and offering you get for themselves. And guess what? It's wildly profitable. And we know this because public companies like PushPay have to publish their reports on how much they earn and how they earn it, and this gives us insight into just how profitable Rev-Share is for church giving providers. So So while PushPay may not disclose their fees until you get in their sales funnel, they do report how much they end up earning off churches once they do have them on their platform, from their annual report, which is publicly available. Of the more than 11,000 churches that use their platform, the average church is paying them $1,457 each month, which is close to $20,000 US per year. And if you look at the breakdown of how much they earn off churches from their subscription costs versus the Rev-Share processing costs, well, that's when you can really see the gap. Because just about 28% of their overall revenue comes from subscriptions, whereas 72% comes from the Rev-Share. From that extra 1% or so they add to the processing fee that they charge you, the church. And we're using PushPay as the example here because they have publicly available data. Companies like Tithely, Subsplash, Ministry Brands, they're private companies, so they don't release that data. But knowing their cost structures are virtually identical and their profit models all run off Rev-Share, we can deduce that they're earning similar amounts, which is why companies like Tithely or Subsplash or Givelify can publicly advertise their giving subscription costs as $0 per month, because that's not how they're making money off churches. They're making money through the Rev-Share, through that artificial inflation of processing fees to keep part of every gift for themselves with no limit or cap. I mean, frankly, it's a shrewd business move. It's very profitable. But for myself and my company, we've never been comfortable with it. Our convictions just don't sit right there. In fact, when we negotiated, the processing companies were kind of taken aback that we didn't want to participate in Rev-Share because it's the standard in the industry. We just think it's time for a new standard. Because this really only exists in the church giving space, and that's because it's allowed to. Like, imagine if your church needed a new presentation software for services. So you talk with ProPresenter, other companies like that, and when you get to the pricing, they say something like, okay, yeah, to use ProPresenter, the cost is $199 per month plus 1% of all your tithes and offerings. That would be a short conversation. Now, perhaps they come back with a counter offer and say, okay, what about if we drop the monthly fee? Now it's $0 per month in subscription costs, but just that, we got to keep that 1% of all your tithes and offerings. It would be a non-starter. And yet it persists in the giving space because we allow it. So let's talk about the pricing model of Nucleus Giving for the sake of comparison, because we are unique. And here's the thing, it's imperative that every church leader understands how these cost structures are calculated so that whomever you end up partnering with, you have clarity on what you're getting yourself into. Because one of the most regrettable things that we hear all the time are churches that are locked into contracts with giving companies that come with hefty termination fees. These churches now finally understand how much they're losing to Rev-Share, but they feel like they can't get out for years. Now, similarly, you may not be in a written contract, but moving giving companies isn't always easy. So if you've recently installed a new giving solution at your church and then you find out about all these fees, again, it's just better to know what you're getting yourself into beforehand. So let's talk about Nucleus Giving and our approach to fees. First, the flat rate for any donation given through Nucleus Giving with a credit card is 1.9% flat. Again, it doesn't matter what credit card it is. We don't charge more for American Express, for example. It doesn't matter how much giving volume your church processes per month. There's no convoluted matrix needed to decipher your true effective rate. It's exceptionally simple, 1.9%. It's the lowest in the industry, and as we've discussed, it's simply because we're not inflating it to keep any for ourselves. Anyone could do this. We're making this choice based on our convictions, and it's translated to millions of dollars staying with the churches that use our platform instead of landing in our pockets. Next, with Nucleus Giving, we also cover all the other costs or fees typically associated with digital transactions, whether that's compliance or security fees, chargebacks, annual fees, any other add-on fee. Now, we haven't talked about those yet, but do you remember earlier in the video, the range of fees I mentioned that Square had reported on was between 2.87 and 4.35%? Now, you may have noticed that those numbers are higher than what we saw publicly listed on church giving provider pricing pages. And the reason is because there are, believe it or not, additional fees that can still get tacked on and added on based on the actual transactions that take place once you have everything set up. Now, these don't get advertised because they're specific to your account and the behavior of your donors. But according to Square, in the end, these additional fees will push your quoted rate anywhere from 28 to 60% higher than what you may see publicly advertised. So for many churches, your effective rate, and that's the key word, the effective rate will be considerably higher once you've done all the math. With Nucleus Giving, we cover those fees so there are no surprises. And then finally, we take it one step further so that when a donor gives to your church, let's say $100, and the 1.9% credit card transaction fee that goes to the credit card company is due, we calculate this fee and add it on top of each donation made automatically. So now that gift will cost the donor $101.90. They cover the 1.9% processing fee. And we do this to ensure that you as the church never lose any of your donations to fees, ever. So here's what that looks like to a giver when they're donating through Nucleus. When you get to the last stage of the giving flow, the total cost comes up at the bottom for the giver, and it shows the convenience fee added with a button to learn more. When that button gets clicked, a box opens up that talks about how much money churches lose to Rev-Share, it talks about the fees, and it explains that with Nucleus giving, we make sure that all the costs are covered for the church so they don't lose any of the intended gift. Most importantly though, we also give the donor the choice to opt out of the fee. So here's what that looks like. Now to this point, we've talked about credit card giving exclusively for the duration of the video for the sake of simplicity, but there's actually another way to give digitally through your bank account. And this is sometimes called ACH giving. The amazing thing about ACH giving is that there is no percentage fee charged. So in this explanation to donors, we lay it out for them. Hey, if you don't want to pay the convenience fee, more power to you. We recommend it, in fact. Instead, give through your bank account and no percentage fee will be taken at all. You can opt out of that fee. And the best part is that giving with your bank account is just as simple with Nucleus as giving with your credit card. You just log into your online banking, select the account, and it's done. And now, instead of a 1.9% convenience fee being added to the gift, to cover the fees that those credit card companies charge, it's just 25 cents flat. No matter the size of the gift, it just costs a quarter. And by doing this, we engage the donors of your church as partners, we educate them on how fees are lost, and importantly, we give them the choice to opt out of the fee as well. And the result is churches saving millions and millions on fees. So for example, here's a church that got a big gift for $42,000. The giver donated through their bank account and there was no percentage fee lost. With other giving platforms, if this gift was done with a credit card, there'd be a fee of around $1,200 there. $400 would go to the giving company and the remaining $800 would go to the credit card company, and the church would get that donation minus those $1,200. In this case, all $42,000 went to the church and the donor was charged a quarter, 25 cents. That's it. Here's another one. This one for $40,000 with a fee of, again, 25 cents because it was given through a bank account. And look, I get it. These are the glamorous examples, right? When a big donation comes in all at once, but it doesn't matter if it's a $40,000 donation all at once or little donations that all add up to $40,000 eventually over any length of time, because the fees will still be the same. And that's the problem when you sign away a percentage of your giving to use a giving provider, the fees always add up. But here's a more everyday example. It's a church of 250. When the pandemic hit, their giving through digital means accelerated, and because they were with Nucleus, they saved roughly $3,000 in fees that would have been lost. And we're talking about a 3% margin in your church's budget that can be reclaimed instead of surrendered to fees. And I get so passionate about this because, we're saving churches millions through this. It's still just a drop in the bucket because Rev-Share accounts for hundreds of millions that churches are losing every single year. And let me just show you one more part, and this is the real punch in the gut. Remember when I talked about ACH giving through your bank account? I said there's no percentage fee to be paid there, it just costs 25 cents. That's because there are no credit card companies to charge percentage fees on those gifts. Credit cards do that, the banks don't. So when you give through your bank, you should never have to pay a percentage fee. But let's go back to the pricing tables of the church giving providers we discussed earlier. For Tithely, giving with your bank account costs 1% plus 30 cents. Again, PushPay doesn't publicly disclose their pricing, but it's virtually the same. For Kindred and for ministry brands, 0.75 to 1% plus 30 to 35 cents, dependent on volume. For Subsplash, 0.5 to 1%. Those percentage fees go straight to those giving companies. Unlike the credit card fees that are artificially inflated, these percentage fees are just invented because bank account giving does not charge a percentage. And again, this behavior persists and continues because it's the norm. It's the standard. We allow it to happen. Churches pay the price, literally, and these companies pad their profit margins. And let's be clear for a moment. I'm not against turning a profit as a company. Nucleus is a for-profit business. We're not a charity. We're profitable. We have been since day one, and we're growing at a healthy, sustainable pace. Where I get frustrated, though, is when giving companies gouge churches and nickel and dime them to the tune of $1,500 a month on average, close to $20,000 a year, to use a giving provider, signing away a percentage of every tithe and offering you receive digitally so you can have a donation portal on your website? Like, just imagine if your website provider asked you to do the same thing, or your worship presentation software, or the software you use to plan your services and schedule your volunteers. It would be ludicrous. This is the only place it exists, but it doesn't need to exist here. So let's do some rapid fire, frequently asked questions now. Let's change the pace a bit. Number one, how does Nucleus Giving make money? Well, simply put, we make money the way every other software provider does. We charge a flat monthly rate. That monthly cost starts at $29 a month. It tops out at $199 per month. And that monthly fee is the only cost churches on our platform ever pay. Determining your monthly cost is as simple as picking your tier based on the size of your church. And the reason we price it this way is that the more giving volume your church processes, the more you benefit from a service like ours that doesn't take away those fees. So if you're a smaller church, you get a smaller rate because even though you're likely gonna process less volume overall in gifts, we still want you to see those big margins in how much you'll save once we reclaim all those fees. And to help with predicting the cost differences for your church with Nucleus, we actually have an interactive savings calculator you can try out. It has two modes. It's got a simple mode and advanced mode. In the simple mode, you just enter your church size and you'll get a number predicting how much your church will save in the first year of using Nucleus Giving. Now, if you click adjust the calculations just below that, you'll get the advanced mode of the calculator. And here you can enter the exact numbers that your church is currently paying for online giving, if you know them, to get a more precise savings prediction. You can find the calculator linked below in the description. But to very clearly illustrate just how much more affordable Nucleus Giving is compared to providers that participate in Rev-Share, let's use the average monthly cost that PushPay earns off a church. And again, you can expect most companies that participate in Rev-Share to be earning similar amounts per church because the pricing strategy is the same. And the vast majority of money that providers earn off of churches is from the fees, remember, right? Not the monthly subscription costs. Again, that monthly cost from PushPay is reported as $1,457 per month. Now let's assume you were on the most expensive Nucleus Giving tier of $199 a month. That works out to $2,388 per year. So the yearly cost of the most expensive Nucleus Giving tier is in the same ballpark as the monthly cost for the average church on PushPay, or with a giving provider that uses a similar Rev-Share pricing model. That's how out of control these fees get. Now let's assume you were on any other Nucleus Giving pricing tier, which the vast majority of churches are. Any tier except for the most expensive, which is only reserved for the largest churches processing the most giving volume. If you were on any other tier, your yearly cost would be less, yes, less than the monthly cost of PushPay or a Rev-Share giving provider. And if this all sounds too good to be true, how can Nucleus Giving be so much more affordable? It's not that we're too good to be true. It's that the current standard of church giving software is in such rough shape for the costs. It's so needlessly expensive for churches that a traditional pricing model for software blows it out of the water. Next question. Aren't you just passing the fees on to the giver? How is that different from other companies? Now, this is a misconception we see from time to time. It's worth addressing. Now that you've seen this video, you're aware of Rev-Share and how processing fees are inflated. When people see Nucleus Giving for the first time and see that we pass the processing fees onto the donor automatically, it's easy to just think that we're the same as every other company, except we make the donors pay the fees instead of the church. No. The reason our fees are the lowest is because we don't participate in Rev-Share. That's the starting point. We then pass on the considerably smaller fee to the donor, and then we allow them to opt out of those percentage fees altogether through bank account donations. And this order of operations allows us to minimize processing fees as much as possible for both churches and for donors. Plus, it invites the donors of your church to be partners in understanding some of the economics of digital giving, which is really powerful. And then one more very important question. Does the Nucleus Giving pricing model actually work at minimizing fees? I mean, sure, we strip out the Rev-Share, so the fees are 1.9% instead of 2.9%-ish for card giving. That 1% is important. I mean, it makes a big difference. The business models of church giving companies are literally running off the back of that single percentage point. So let's not diminish that. But in practice, when that 1.9% credit card fee is passed on to the donor, does that responsibility actually translate to more bank account giving, let's say, and thus more people avoiding the fees overall? Or does it just frustrate donors over time because now the fee is their responsibility? To fully answer this question, let's compare Nucleus Giving with another popular giving provider that I've yet to mention by name in this video, and that is Planning Center Giving. Now, why haven't I mentioned PCO Giving yet? Well, because Planning Center is one of the few rare exceptions of a church giving provider that does not participate in Rev-Share, just like Nucleus. Planning Center's fees are 2.15% plus 30 cents for card giving, and would you look at that, 0% plus 25 cents for ACH bank account giving. So we can see that Planning Center is not inflating their processing fees artificially to keep donations for themselves, and I salute them for that. Their fees for card giving are still higher than ours, but comparable. The main difference between Planning Center and Nucleus, though, is that with Planning Center, the donors have the choice to opt in and cover the fee. With Nucleus, they have the choice to opt out and avoid the fee by switching to bank account giving. So both are given the same choice essentially, but the way we present it is slightly different. Now, when those two options are stacked up against each other, how do they actually perform at scale? We have the numbers for this, and you might expect that they perform virtually the same, but in practice, that couldn't be farther from the truth. According to Planning Center, the average effective rate they're seeing for churches in reports that span greater than 12 months is currently around 1.6%. At Nucleus, we looked at every single dollar ever given through our platform, hundreds of millions in total, and around 70% of the overall volume was bank account giving, meaning the effective rate for fees on our platform was just 0.63%. About 1/3 of planning centers, a full percentage point less. And as we've discussed throughout, 1 percentage point makes a colossal difference in the world of fees. Entire business models for $100 million giving companies are predicated on a 1% fee. 1% is the difference between a provider that participates in Rev-Share and a provider that doesn't. Well, even when comparing Nucleus to a provider that doesn't keep donations for themselves, that doesn't participate in Rev-Share, we still shave off another whole percentage point just by giving parishioners in churches the ability to opt out of the fee rather than the choice to opt in to the fee. Instead of saying to givers, hey, want to cover the fee? Just click this box. We're essentially saying, hey, want to avoid this fee? Just click this box and switch to bank account giving. And that subtle difference accounts for a full percentage point in fees being eliminated, which in practice accounts for millions of dollars. Now, for the sake of clarity, the effective rate on Nucleus giving for churches is always 0%, right? Because you, the church, will never lose donations to fees. But the purpose of this exercise is to show just how effective our method is at minimizing fees for both churches and parishioners overall. For those that don't mind paying the credit card fee because of the convenience that comes with it, they do. And for those that want to donate without being charged a percentage fee, well, they do, by giving through their bank account. And by bringing your donors into this economic equation and making them partners, everyone wins. It's the most effective giving strategy by far for avoiding fees, and we think it's in line with the heart of church when it's at its best, everyone playing their part as a joint community. And if you'll humor me for one moment longer, we've talked about the effective rate of church giving providers a couple of times. When it's all said and done, how much of each gift is going to fees? On Nucleus Giving, it's 0.63%. With Planning Center Giving, it's about 1.6%. What about with the Rev-Share giving providers? For that, let's look to Subsplash. Here's what they have to say about effective rates on their website. An effective rate of 3% or less is great. If your effective rate is 3 to 4%, consider negotiating for a better processing rate or finding a lower cost giving platform. If your effective rate is higher than 4%, make a change as soon as possible. So pay special attention here. Subsplash is clearly observing that a difference in just 1% of fees is worth making a change as soon as possible. Now, even though Subsplash participates in Rev-Share and inflates their fees, perhaps their effective rate for many churches comes in at 2.5% when it's all said and done, which is admittedly slightly better than other Rev-Share providers. The Nucleus Giving effective rate is 0.63%, essentially a full 2 percentage points difference. So if a 1% in savings necessitates changing your provider as soon as possible, what about double that? Now, like I said at the beginning of this video, it's easy for this to come off as self-serving, but truly, whomever you decide to partner with in the world of giving, understanding the cost structure is imperative. Rarely is this stuff transparent, and rarely can a church accurately predict the effective rate it will pay in its first year of using a giving company. We're on a mission to change that, to provide an alternative option, but most importantly, for every single one of us, to educate churches and leaders on the true costs of Rev-Share and how much is being left on the table because of it. And if you're at this point in the video and you're thinking to yourself, you know what, I understand how this all works now in full, and I'm still okay with the costs of a Rev-Share giving provider, that's absolutely fine. Because the intent of a video like this isn't to convince every viewer that a single solution is the right solution for every church, but instead to openly discuss the pricing of providers that many churches aren't privy to until they've been on a platform for a full fiscal year, and then they see that line item in the budget and all the money lost to fees. Well, at that point, it often feels more difficult to switch than to just keep going now that they've fully invested into a new system. To that end, we do want to make switching giving providers easier if that's your prerogative, and if you've made it this far in this video, I can't thank you enough, so this is for you. If you do find yourself in a place where you're motivated to divest your church from a Rev-Share giving provider, something we do to help churches in that situation is to add an extra 3 months of free time on our platform in your first year. So in practice, let's say you sign up for Nucleus Giving on an annual plan and your sign up date is November 1st, 2021. Well, normally your renewal date would be November 1st, 2022, the following year. Instead, with these extra 3 months of free time, your renewal date becomes 15 months after your sign up date instead of 12. So now that date is February 1st, 2023. The link to claim this offer is above me. It's also linked in the description, or you can go directly to nucleus.church/giving/3free. And the reason we do this is because, ideally, when you're switching giving providers, there will be a time where you're using both platforms so as to smoothly transition from one to another. In our experience, 3 months is around how much time you'll need to budget for this. And so this way, those 3 months added to your next billing date give you 3 months of cover to make the switch, to do it the right way, and to not worry about having to pay for both platforms at the same time. If you want to learn more about Nucleus Giving, you can head to nucleus.church/giving/3free. That's the special link you want to use, and you can see the platform in greater depth there. If you click on this button here on that page, you can test out a giving flow and see what it's like to actually donate yourself through Nucleus Giving. Now, this video tackles the cost side of our platform, but of course there's the product side as well, the features, the capabilities, and the experience. So head to that link to learn more about that. You'll also find the savings calculator there on that page, so you can test that out to project how much your church can expect to save in the first year. And if you have questions or want to talk to a real person on our team, just click the shoot us a message button at the bottom of the page. We would love to hear from you. And then lastly, remember, we've got the PDF download for the fees cheat sheet linked below, along with this content in blog post format for handy reference and easy sharing. And if you have follow-up questions to this video, I've done my best to lay it out as clearly as I can, but obviously it's a lot of information all at once. So put any questions you do have in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Thanks as always for your time, attention, and trust, and we'll talk soon.